Hello, everyone. Dr. Rush here with another installment of some gynecology topics that I said that I was going to start to become or make more robust on the channel. I did look over the channel to look at the topics that got a lot of traffic. And one of those topics that did receive a lot of traffic was the topic on Bartholin glands, cysts, and abscesses. So what I wanted to do here today and to discuss is the Bartholin gland cyst or abscess in the woman, over the age of 40, because these are not always treated equal. And for many of you who have had these, you already kind of know where it's located and what the symptoms are and how painful Bartholin gland cysts or abscesses can be, and they can become very large and also very uncomfortable. So for those of you who don't really know where the Bartholin gland actually sits, I wanted to explain that a little bit here. And I created sort of a little rundown of how I wanted to discuss this. So I'm going to be reading here a little bit of things and topics that I wanted to make sure that I ended up covering in this particular video. So the Bartholin gland actually sits at the vaginal opening and produces lubrication. It produces lubrication during intercourse and just in general. A cyst can form when the duct of the Bartholin gland actually gets clogged. The fluid actually builds up because the fluid doesn't have any place to go because the duct is clogged, and then it creates swelling. And sometimes it can become infected and become an abscess. And sometimes in those cases, I think in one of my videos, I talked about sitz baths, but some people may require antibiotics actually if it's infected. Some women end up having these, what we call IND'd, or we do an incision and drainage, and then there's a ward catheter that's placed in so that we can keep that open so that it can continue to drain, and it kind of heals from the inside out. And as it heals, it pushes out that ward catheter, or sometimes you just have to have it deflated and removed when it seems like it's ready to be removed after it's drained and it starts to heal. So, but for some women, that's not possible, and we have to do something called a marsupialization, especially in women where these are recurrent. If they're recurrent and women have had multiple incision and drainage procedures and these things keep coming back, then we have to go a different route. There are some instances where we actually have to remove the gland altogether. And there, are some different techniques that are being developed or have been developed that are not as often utilized because insurance doesn't pay for it. And that's, removing these with CO2 lasers. And you all can, look more into that. And if, there's any additional information that you all want on that particular procedure, just, add, comments and questions in the comments, and I can do another video on that. And as always, like and subscribe. That's how people get to our channel. And they can get more information. And the more people like and subscribe, the higher we go up in the algorithm, and the more this information gets out to the women and to the people that need it. So now, looking at this from the standpoint of women and age groups. So in women under the age of 40, these Bartholin cysts are almost always benign, and they're treated in the ways that I just described. Sometimes they don't require incision or drainage. Sometimes they don't require us putting a ward catheter in. And sometimes they don't require marsupialization, and they just may require some sort of comfort care like sitz baths and different things like that. And that's great. And sometimes they're not abscesses where they require antibiotic therapy. But this is different in women over the age of 40, and women over the age of 40 need to take these a little bit more seriously, because it can mean something different, and it can mean something particularly a bit sinister. So in women over 40, a new Bartholin gland mass it should be evaluated very carefully. And the concerns in this case are, basically a Bartholin gland carcinoma or cancer. So these are very rare. Chances, are of it, something with the Bartholin gland being a carcinoma is, between 1% and 4%, but still in all, it needs to be evaluated and appropriately and assessed, nonetheless. Essentially, it can look like a simple cyst, but in women, over the age of 40, when you have these things like, it being new onset, it has a firm texture, it's irregular, or it's kind of fixate, sort of fixed where there's no fluctuation in it. Where, you can touch it and you can kind of, move fluid around in there. I guess that's the best way to describe that. Those, definitely need to be evaluated. And also, it being recurrent in the same location. Again, being recurrent in the same location in a younger person, this, oftentimes, again, is relieved with marsupialization, and hopefully, no recurrence happens after that. That's the point in doing the marsupialization procedure, is to have it not recur. But in the older woman, and I won't say older because 40 is, that's the new 20 nowadays, but still in all it's 40 and higher. You want to make sure that you go into your gynecologist, because this may require a biopsy where they're trying to rule out a cancer. So what things should be red flags here? Basically the mass being persistent, despite it being drained. So you may end up, going to get it drained, but it's still there. Another thing that should be concerning, and I think I just, mentioned this a bit ago, is it being solid and not fluid filled. So it's not fluctuant. That's that idea of it being fixed, essentially. If you have ulcerations of that area, or meaning that, you constantly see like an ulcer there, it's not healing, or consistently continues to bleed, that's something to be concerned about. And it's what we call unilateral. So it's only occurring on one side. Most often, Bartholin cysts or abscesses are unilateral. They don't typically occur bilaterally, meaning on both sides of the vulva where, each of the Bartholin glands sits. It's usually just one side. But the other thing that needs to, that can be concerning, if there's what we call lymphadenopathy. What does that mean? So you have lymph nodes that sit right in the crevice or the crease of your leg and your pubic area. And if in fact those become enlarged with the presence of this Bartholin's, gland being enlarged, or there being a mass there, then that can be concerning, because that's where cancer is going to spread to. Cancer will spread to the lymph nodes, essentially. And that's why when women have breast cancer, they also check the lymph nodes, because those lymph nodes can be affected. And when we get to the lymph nodes, then we wonder whether or not there's been dissemination of that cancer into other areas of the body outside of just the vulva or the lips of the vagina and the lymph nodes. If this has actually gotten through into the bloodstream, it can go to other organs and different things like that. So what's the bottom line here about Bartholin cysts or gland cysts or abscesses in the woman, over the age of 40? Most of them, in the majority of the time, are still benign. Chances of a cancer, like I said, is about 1% to 4%. But the threshold to biopsy this area when you're over the age of 40 is very low for many gynecologists. And so that's why it's important to have it evaluated, so that it can be biopsy potentially if necessary. But you also want to keep in mind the red flags that we talked about here. And the goal really is early detection. So making sure that we don't have, if there is a cancer, it's not disseminated, through the lymph system that can then, affect other organs and things like that. So the most important thing, as I always say, when in doubt, check it out. If you that's why it's very good for people to keep a gynecologist, no matter how old you are. I know that some women have had hysterectomies and they don't think that they need pap smears. Many of them don't that have had hysterectomies, but there is a certain population that still do, regardless to whether or not, the cervix and the uterus is gone. But we'll get into that conversation for another day. But it's always good to keep a gynecologist, no matter how old you are, because these things can show up. And the last thing you want to do is to not have a relationship with a gynecologist, let this go and just say, oh, I'll, worry about it next week, or I'll, call somebody. Nowadays, it's kind of hard to find us and to find one you like and you trust. So being able to maintain a relationship with one throughout a woman's life cycle is going to be very important. So if in fact you ever run into this issue, even for women that are not over the age of 40, go into your gynecologist, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be able to give you the best options in terms of how to move forward. So I hope this was helpful. And again, like and subscribe. If you have any questions, place those in the comments. All right, guys. Thanks so much. See you soon.